Welcome to the first Sculptris modeling tutorial for Mr. Bourgeois' game design and modeling classes. Today we're going to be going over the basics of Sculptris, and that includes the 9 tools up here that you'll be using to model, the scene tools, and the save tools, or how you're actually going to be manipulating your object as a file. We're also going to be going over the tool settings up here, as well as some basic key shortcuts. So we're going to start with some key shortcuts, all right? So the first one that you're going to need to know is holding down middle mouse button rotates around your scene as so. The second one is that holding down right click does the exact same thing. So it's up to you which one you want to use. Now, holding down the Alt key and doing right click actually moves your object in the scene as a whole. And holding down Alt and middle mouse button does the same thing as rotate. So there you go. Now left click is actually going to allow you to use the tool on the marked area you see here. That's the orange circle. And we're going to start going over the tools right now. So starting with the crease tool. The crease tool adds little valleys or indentations into your object like this. So I'm just moving it around so I can get a better look at right here. Going to curve that back up. And we've made a sort of, I don't know exactly, but it's demonstrating the crease tool. There you go. Each tool has a size and strength setting up here in the top left corner, and that will always do the thing it says. If this will affect the size, this will affect the strength. You can also invert it, and by inverting crease, you get a little draw, like this. There you go. So I'm going to hit that back off. You'll notice this bar right here, the detail bar. The detail bar actually doesn't affect the tool. The detail bar affects this object. Having a high amount of detail means that you have a high amount of polys in your project. Having a low detail means having a low amount of polys in your project. Low polys means low detail and less ease of manipulating. You'll see right here, I've sort of got these weird marks here where it looks like triangles. But if I do this, go back up, notice it's much smoother. You see it right there. Yeah, look at that. Very nice. Low poly, high poly. There you go. Moving on to the rotate tool. The rotate tool does exactly as it says. It rotates your object. Doing this by just clicking and moving the mouse around up or down. By turning on global, you rotate the entire object rather than just the selected portion. Once again, you can manipulate size and strength there. Scale, since I have it on global right now, is scaling up the entire object. If I turn off global, it scales the selected portion. Draw. Draw is the opposite of the crease tool. Instead of creating ridges, or I guess valleys, you create little markings or raisings on the object right here. And inverting it does the exact same as the crease tool. Only you now have an indentation that is more similar to the raising of the draw tool if it were opposite. If you turn on clay, you end up getting a draw that's more similar to what you would do if you were drawing on a clay. Turning on soft, or turning off soft, I guess in this case, just decreases the amount of smooth you have on that draw. There you go, it's a little bit more smooth. It's not really noticeable. I don't even use clay when I'm modeling. Just that's there. The flatten tool, again, exactly as it says, it flattens. You'll notice right here, since I have on lock angle plane, when I flatten, I'm creating a raised surface, like a plateau. If I turn that off, instead of creating a raised surface, I am just flattening the area on the object. There you go. So like all this mess I just made, I'm going to flatten that a little bit. It just goes right back into the clay. There you go. The angle fall off just changes the degree to which the flattening is happening. Like that. It's not really noticeable. Now, the most important tool, I believe, is the grab tool. The grab tool allows you to just move parts of your object. Now, why is this so important? Well, because it's usually the first tool you'll be using when you're starting a new model, which is what we're going to do right now. We're going to click on New Sphere, which is the sphere right here, and hit New Scene, which removes everything in your scene so far and adds a new sphere. Yes, we're going to want to do that. Now, starting with the grab tool, we're going to create a sort of medium size and a low strength, and we're just going to start moving it around. Now we start getting something a little bit more interesting than just our sphere. Maybe it's an occultist or a Cthulhu creature of some kind. Who knows? The point is that we are starting to create an organism or a creature and not just have a sphere that we are drawing on. Right here, the global, once again, just moves the entire object. And by adding limit to your grab, you actually get an exponential decrease to the area at which you can manipulate. So notice how before I was able to just do that, or I guess that, and just continue grabbing outwards and outwards. With limit on, I can only go out so far before it stops, and I can only just move it around at an angle rather than outwards anymore. So that's the grab tool, and I'm not sure exactly what we've created, but we're going to keep using it to explain the rest of the tools. This is the inflate tool. The inflate tool is similar to the draw tool in the sense that you're creating raised markings on your object, but the inflate tool creates a much smoother raising, more like a pimple or I guess, that's kind of gross, but yeah, a pimple of sorts. And it just sort of keeps on adding clay to the area you're moving your mouse on. So we've got these two little eye stalks right now for our weird alien, who knows. All right. The pinch tool is the effect of what you would do if you were pinching clay. It creates a sort of line, a marking, if you will, around the area you're pinching. It just sort of smooths in that area into a small valley. So like the crease tool, but also smoothing. And speaking of smooth, here's the smooth tool, which does, again, exactly as it says. It smooths. So I have it on really high strength right now, which is why we're able to just flatten that entire part of our creature. But if we decrease that and decrease size a bit, now we get a more gradual smooth, and we're able to kind of create fine details. So this mess over here, let's start smoothing this out. And I'm just moving my mouse around wherever I see detail that's messed up. Increase the size a bit, maybe the strength. And almost. Voila. Can't even tell anymore. There you go. Except for that, we're going to ignore that. And those are the 9 tools that you're going to be using to model within Sculptris. So just remember that you'll always have little options up here to change your tools, and the detail, which affects the amount of polys affected on the object by the tool. So high detail means you're going to create much more smooth and realistic changes with your tools. Low detail means you're going to get, I guess with the smooth tool you can't really see it, but with the crease tool here, now we've got really weird sort of poly shapes going on. Like right here, you can see the triangles that have been messed up by the tool. There you go. Now let's move on to the scene tools. Welcome to the scene tools part of the Sculptris tutorial. I'm going to be going over these tools right here now. So starting off, I have wireframe on, which allows me to see the actual polygons of the object itself. This is useful if you're ever in a case where you don't know how detailed your model actually is, and you want to see if that's the issue as to why your model is messed up. So turning this on and off just adds a little layer there. Symmetry creates this white-gray line down the center of your object. and means that anything you do on one side of your object will be repeated on the other. Turning it off is a one-way operation, which means you can't go back, but it turns off symmetry and means that anything you create happens independently of the other side of the object. Now, let's turn on the reduce brush. So the reduce brush actually reduces the polygons in the area you move over. So you're going to see, I'm going to just simplify the polygons of this little hump here. So instead of having a high number, now I have a very few number. And if you keep adding to it, you start to get even fewer and fewer. So now all of my polygons are concentrated on one point, which is usually not what you want to do, but that's what the reduce brush tool does. The reduce selected does the same thing, but over the entire object, and just decreases the amount of polygons. The subdivide all button adds more polygons inside of the ones you've previously reduced. So now we have lots and lots and lots of polygons, which is usually not very good for the computer because it makes it more likely to crash. So we're going to hit new sphere, new scene, and there you go. The final tool is the mask tool. Now, the mask tool is kind of finicky. I've never really been able to use it that well. What it's supposed to do is by going over the actual area, it's supposed to reduce how much that area is affected by your tools. I've never gotten it to work, as you see here. What it also does, which I have found useful, is it adds a very high number of polygons to an area. So it's like the opposite of the brush tool in that way, or the opposite of the reduce brush tool in that way. So if you're ever in a point where you want to add a number of polygons, then you use the mask tool. There you go. And that concludes the scene tools portion of the Sculptris tutorial. Welcome to the final part of the Sculptris intro tutorial, where we're going to be going over how to actually save your object. So we're going to add a quick manipulation to this object and create a weird, rigid ball of some kind. There you go. All right, so now we want to save this, but how do we do that? So not that, that's the import, which will actually be important for when you want to bring files from your 3ds Max into Sculptris. That's export, which is important for when you're actually going to want to move files from Sculptris into 3ds Max. Import and export both work with OBJ files, which is important to know, and it's also a little reminder there as you see the little OBJ right there. New plane will, like the new sphere, just add a new plane and reset the scene. Open is opening a previous Sculptris file, and here we finally have save. So, if you're done with the Sculptris file for now and you want to get back to it, hit save. You go to a little area where you want to save it. I'll save it to my 3D models in progress. We'll name it blob ball, save, and there you go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hit new sphere, new scene, and we're going to go to open, and there you go, open up blob ball. And it's right where we left it. There we go. Now, importing and exporting work very similar, so we're going to actually export because I don't have any files for us to import from 3ds Max right now, but if you do ever have an OBJ, you can import that into Sculptris, and then you can start working with the sculpt tools. So let's export this. There we go. So we're exporting it to our desktop, where you see I already have a bunch of other OBJ files, and we're going to name this blob ball again. And we're going to save it as a wavefront OBJ file. And now it's been exported, and we can open that up in other 3D modeling software and move around and work with it in there rather than just in Sculptris. And actually, since I saw I have those other files, we're going to import this right here. We're going to import the violin. And of course, because Sculptris doesn't like very high detailed objects, so the violin OBJ that I have isn't actually the best for this. Let's try to import this. All right. Looks like we actually got it. Never mind, Sculptris crashed. This will happen a lot. Sculptris is not the best organics sculpting program right now available to people, but it is free and it's easy to learn. So let's try opening this up again. It's probably going to crash again. Yep. All right. So, which goes to show in and of itself that Sculptris is not very good for high detailed objects. So, if you ever want to use a high detailed or high poly count OBJ and edit that, it is better to work with that in 3ds Max. Sculptris is really great for doing beginnings to a model. So if you have an idea for a skull or a low poly candle or something else that's very organic and requires you to have a smooth or a flatten or a draw or a crease tool, you're going to want to start it in Sculptris, export it as an OBJ, and open it up in 3ds Max to finish, because that's a more powerful program and will actually allow you to make changes to the model that you would be able to do in Sculptris. And that about concludes the modeling portion of the Sculptris tutorial, or the basic intro to Sculptris. There will be another tutorial where I'll actually go over the process of modeling an object, and we're just going to see these tools in action. And it'll be one that you can follow along with, hopefully, and get some beginning practice working in the program. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a fun time modeling.